Okay, so I want to make this video about production methods in a grid down, off grids, or otherwise haywire scenario, whether it's collapse of currency, EMP event destroying the electricity system, or something else where things otherwise aren't very kosher. So what I often do, I've worked in quite a few places where there's a lot of automation. I'm in manufacturing at the moment. There's plenty of automation there. When I was at the nursery, there was a massive amount of automation. They only needed 6 or 7 people working on 2 different sewing lines to be able to sew 300 million plants a year. 300 million plants a year. They could have actually done more in many cases, but they just didn't have the orders for it. And the other one that I've worked in casually is the chicken industry around here, because there's quite a bit of chicken industry going on around here. Now, one aspect of it is the hillbilly mentality of improvisation. There are so many things where you can look at, well, say a drench container, a 5-gallon cube container, and there are so many things you can make because there are parts of it that are flat because it is a watertight thing, and you add on a few bits of sheet metal and a few screws and whatnot, and you can turn it into a letterbox. I've seen 44-gallon drums that have been turned into gasifiers, and all these sort of things that you can do just with sheet metal. If you understand things in the real finite terms when it comes to manufacturing, you can make a lot of things with sheet metal. You can almost treat sheet metal as cardboard boxes are treated in regards to making folds in them and little tabs, and then just go ahead with the cordless drill and the riveter and rivet them up. And there's another aspect to it as well, and that is getting, doing what I do a lot, where I look at an automated system and I say, how can I do this at my house? And I mightn't do it exactly the same, but I'll do it similar by substituting certain methods with other methods. For instance, at work at the moment, there's a process whereby parts are wet and they need to be dried before they're painted. They use an enormous amount of natural gas to dry these parts out. And I've worked out that with a solar-powered fan, or maybe even a Peltier generator running on the flue, I could use a small electric fan and wood heating to achieve the same thing and circulate that heat around these products using the solar-powered or Peltier-powered fan. Another great one is battery hen systems, comparative to free range. They get, 8-fold the chooks into these areas, and then you start looking at the electricity used. The older systems, there were only 1 layer of cages high. They were sort of very efficient, but now everything needs an electric motor and everything needs a conveyor belt. They stack these cages one on top of the other. There are some brands of system, particularly a German brand, that will allow you to have 26 cages high. Yes, which is fine for Europe, where they've got limited space. But, if you're on a few acres, you probably don't need to really have cages stacked 26 high. And in between each cage, or basically at the bottom of every cage, they've got a large conveyor belt which carries which holds the chook manure from the cage above it to stop it from dropping on the chooks in the cage below them, to stop them getting manure on the chooks below them. Yeah, but those conveyor belts have to be run at least twice a week, and sometimes every second day, to clear them out. And they use massive three-phase motors. And yet you go into where I've dealt with free-range eggs, they have some that are partially automated. You could use an engine off a gopher, like one of those little scooters that your nana has, to run the one conveyor belt in that system. How they had it was there were plenty of eggs on the floor that you'd have to go and pick up. But that wasn't desirable to pick them all up by hand. So what they had was nesting boxes, which are these little boxes, and there's a sort of cosy little thing with rubber mats in them. They got a little curtain in the front so the chook can go in there, and it's sort of dark for it, and sort of, it can rest for a bit, and then lay its egg. And basically the last 4 or 5 inches of these cages had a slant. Well, they weren't cages, they were literally boxes with solid sides, made to be dark, but they had a little slant at the back, and when the chook would lay his egg, it would roll down that slant onto a conveyor belt. And they had these either side of this one conveyor belt, and these eggs would just roll down on this conveyor belt. And this conveyor belt only needed a motor, the same as your nan's little scooter has, your little, gopher for going to the shops and that, to run this conveyor belt, and it would bring up all these eggs to another room on the end of the shed in which the chooks were kept, and all those eggs, you could then pack them away, and they're perfectly clean because they hadn't been on the floor with all the chook shit. But systems like that, it might have only had 1/8 the chooks, but by hell, you needed bugger all electricity. You could have run that thing literally off of, I don't know, a lousy 150, 200 watts of electricity for 25 minutes, 3 times a day, as opposed to thousands on thousands of watts. Absolutely, it would have been in the tens of thousands. It would have been, when those systems are running, you'd be looking at, when the manure was being emptied out, you'd be looking at 20,000 plus watts being drawn at any one point of emptying the manure off of those conveyor belts. I mean, it was astronomical, the electricity difference. And, there's ways that, with a grid down scenario, you'll understand why I suggested hoarding up 55 or 44 gallon drums. You'll start to understand that while it may not be absolutely perfect to have it, you can get the job done with that, 4 or 5 gallon plastic tube container, because it fits a lot of Parramatters. While things don't work quite so aesthetically pleasing, you couldn't have some gold digger woman say that it actually looked nice, but you can still run the equipment, get the job done, and still at the end of the day have productivity. And this is how the Chinese run. They use crappy equipment. I've seen some of this equipment they use, but at the end of the day, they come out with products that are almost good as the products made on really highly professional equipment, by using all this second-hand old equipment that Westerners would be selling for scrap metal. And the same goes for improvisation. It may not be the best equipment, but at the end of the day, when you're still, in bed, nice and warm, with a wood heater going, and your food, your stomach full of food, you're fine. You've sorted your ass out. You've managed to make a go of it, and that's the main thing. You may have had a gasifier that was made out of, a sort of 44 gallon drum or whatever. You may not have a BMW in the garage, but you've still got engines that run off gasifiers to run water pumps, so you can grow a massive amount of plants, therefore increasing your ability to barter with the outside world, and quite possibly in a grid down scenario where food shortages are common, that may place you on the top of the pecking order. And you know, there's so many things that hillbillies do with improvisation that may seem really nasty and ugly, but you know, as the Chinese have learnt, does it really matter what it looks like if it works? And you know, they've also worked out that at the end of the day, if their product that they made with crappy equipment is almost as good as the high class equipment, well, they've produced a product with not only a you know, low outlay costs for labour or low outlay costs for materials, but they've also had low outlay costs for initial equipment setup, which may also interest you quite a bit when there's, you know, not so much money floating around to go buying fancy equipment to achieve production of particular goods. And you know, the other thing that I probably should throw in while I'm doing all this, keep in mind that if things do go to the wall with currency, you know, having a BMW M5 won't matter to your accountant if he hasn't eaten for 3 days. There are certain other things that will go down really well in exchange for stuff. I'm sure tobacco growing will go down quite well. So will other things such as painkillers. Chocolate will probably be just about on a par with gold. Bars. You know, there's Chinese herbal medicine will be fantastic if there's shortages of medication. Chinese herbal medicine does work, believe me, it worked quite well for me. It even worked well for my father when he was a kid back in the 1950s. My grandmother he had a few problems with eczema and things like that, and my grandmother used to take him to a Chinese bloke who practiced Chinese medicine. And so learning these things and gaining this knowledge of improvisation, of how to achieve similar production under off-grid conditions, that you may be, you know, modifying a on-grid production method that you see your boss using in your factory, to be able to change and tweak it to, you know, suit off-grid. And the other one is, you know, basically being productive with very little equipment, and most of all producing stuff that will actually get used, such as food, such as medicine, such as painkillers, and the big clanger, toilet paper. Holy smoke, if you think chocolate's going to be worth a lot when there's a grid down scenario, wait till bloomin' you see toilet paper. That'll be like the next best thing after chocolate, basically. So yeah, you know, think about what people will need, and I have another video which will show what people will need, and I may throw similar things in the description on this video, and yeah, then you'll know what you should be making or stockpiling as an exchange, or working out how to do under off-grid situation or limited supply from the outside world, or with minimal equipment.